That's interesting. All right. That was odd. I don't know if I've ever had that happen before. So, welcome to another stream of Together We Write. My name is Chris Perzicki, instructor in English and Humanities here at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. Together We Write is a weekly live stream all about writing, mostly focused on the type of professional and technical writing that we do in my courses, but am excited to be sort of, I don't know, opening this up for the greater UWGB campus. Um, that said, if you have any topics that you would like covered, please shoot me an email. If you're watching this, I'm assuming that you're a UWGB student or instructor or staff, and you should be able to get a hold of me fairly easily just looking it up in our directory. However, if you are interested in having some of your writing reviewed live on the stream, go ahead and use the form. If you're in one of my courses, the form is in Canvas. I can also send you a link if you email me. Otherwise, ask your instructor, and assuming that this is for a writing foundations course, you will be able to. They may have the link. Otherwise, we can get that for you. If need be, you could go ahead and just email me your writing that you would like reviewed. However, just make sure that you have all private information removed from that. I hesitate. I prefer not to use email because then there's a name attached to it. But that's not a huge deal. I won't spill the beans, but just make sure that your name, phone number, address, and any other information that can be used to identify you is off of the stream. This is broadcasting worldwide to an audience of millions. So, got my airborne happening. I've been fighting some congestion the last couple days, so trying to take care of that. Anyway, looks like we're up and running. And so there's a couple of things that we want to talk about today. First off is a form of professional writing that is used remarkably, quite often. It is everywhere you go. It is publicly accessible, mostly publicly accessible, but it is not always as familiar. It's a weird piece of writing, the memo, because we are inundated by them. We see them everywhere where we go, but we don't often write them, or we don't think about it writing them until it's too late. And there's a few different qualities about the memo that I think are worth looking at, both for the way that they're written, the tone, the formality. There's also this point of view that you write with, an objective voice that once you write one, it can be jarring, especially if for students who have not written one before. But so we try to do these in my class because they're depending on which class you're in. We do these because I think it's a very important form of writing for our business writing students, because assuming they will be in a position, whether you're in HR or communications, writing on behalf of someone, a manager or a CEO, or you are a CEO, CIO, manager yourself, writing to your in a department or a group of employees. So the So, what is a memo? Oh, well, the second uh, piece on the agenda, and one of the reasons I'm running a little bit behind, is trying to find an appropriate example to use on the stream here. So, one of the things that's important is to find a what do you call it? An example, so I can talk through it. But I also want to talk about peer review and feedback and how we do that. So um, I'm going to be using Word here. So if again, if you're in one of my classes, we are just starting our peer review discussion. We're going over that in great detail, and I'll get to that as we go through it. But I do want to just want to. All right, yeah. Let's see. What else are we looking at? All the appropriate windows up. Um, if you are fortunate enough to be a UWGB student, I highly encourage you to take Chris Williams' streaming class the next time it's being offered. It is going right now. Um, I don't know how many courses are out there that focus on live streaming, but boy, I certainly wish that I had had a course like this years ago. Anyway, all right. So memos. Uh, the first time I ever wrote a memo, and I don't think I've written many of them, maybe less than a hand count for sure. But interestingly, the first memo I ever wrote was on behalf of a public figure, a state governor, actually, which was kind of odd. It was not a very important memo, but definitely an interesting situation writing on behalf of someone who I don't know why you would assume that a governor is writing their own memos, but uh, yeah. Anyway, so there's a few things going on here. I wanted to find a decent example that is might be worth. If you are good example is found on Purdue Owl, for example. Okay, so we'll go slide this over here so you can look at this. Yeah, pretty straightforward. There's a number of different parts to that looking at this nice example. It's really well done. We've got we've got our the person being addressed to Kelly Anderson, marketing executive, from Jonathan Fitzgerald, market research assistant. All of a sudden, you may be looking at this example, which is kind of unique because the memo is to a single person rather than an entire department or team or staff. Now, uh, most uh, most memos that I've encountered are to a larger group of people. So a small department, small team, or a large department, or the entire staff, or from all the way up to the CEO, to everyone beneath them, right? This is a unique one because it's to one person, and here we have the date, and then we have the subject, and I'll take these piece by piece in a minute. Now, that's followed by a short paragraph describing precisely what the memo is all about. And I'm just going to go over the layout of this memo and again go back into what's happening here. Oh my goodness, Purdue Owl, what happened? Used to be a very straightforward site with ads. That's a weird one. Um, Followed, notice how unlike a in most emails and even most forms of correspondence, we are starting to introduce some headings and subheadings in here. All right, so we've got internet advertising, another piece here. We've got bulleted list followed by some more information. Here's another heading. So we have a memo can contain sections, right? It can contain different pieces of information sort of packaged together. Now, so why, in this case, it's kind of odd um, that this is sent to one person, unless, why this wouldn't be an email, I'm not entirely sure, other than that this memo is actually going out to uh, for a wider audience, right? So, and last week we talked a little bit about audiences, I believe, I think. So this one's kind of interesting. So the Kelly Anderson in this case is the primary audience, right? It's explicit. However, I suspect that this in this example, we're actually thinking about secondary audiences as well. The writer of this was intentionally thinking about who else would be reading this. In this case, it might be an entire company, right? So we've got a one person to person form of communication that's actually being written with like bringing in that secondary audience, including them as well. So it's very different from an email, which is usually between individuals or an individual to others or from a small group to others, or even a cover letter, which is from one person to, let's say, a job cover letter from one person to hiring committee or team, HR department, or other hiring manager. So let's break this down a little bit. We've got our to or from. Notice that we have the titles here. Why would we include the titles? Well, it hints at another reason why, in this case, a memo is being used uh, for, like I said, it is on the surface, it's a person to person form of communication. However, a memo is often regarded as something that's more openly viewable. So, and if not at that time, to an at present audience. So, say if Kelly Anderson, the marketing executive, and here's the research assistant, if this is containing information that's going to be viewed by the entire marketing team, then that would be the secondary audience, right? But this is the other important function of a memo. And now that it comes to mind, I do wonder if this is sort of an outmoded way of thinking about it. Um, but memos are also a form of record keeping. In fact, when I was looking for a decent, legitimate example of a memo, one of the things that comes up is have we have a UWGB. So we have one from a couple years ago from, let's see, to the scenario planning task force chairs from the interim chancellor as well as the chancellor elect. This is a public uh, record, right? So it's one of the important things about memos, and this is something I really like, and one of the reasons why I like people to one of many reasons why I think they're worth considering is we don't often in our professional life, we don't it rarely comes to mind that your work is going to be part of history. Like as a business owner, for example, you are making history. As a any sort of practitioner, where you're putting something out there in the world, making something real, you're creating history. And so one of the shortcomings of practice, however, is not documenting it. How often have you, encountered something and wondered, why the heck did they do that? Well, for me, working for a public institution, a lot of what I do is available somewhere, buried under mountains of web links and bureaucracy and bad websites. There's probably a record of everything from uh, my web, the my online courses are available through Canvas because I choose to distribute them under a Creative Commons license. Even my payroll is available online because I'm a public employee. Now, here, this example, these memos, because they're coming from a public institution, this is one reason why they're available. Most government agencies have publicly accessible memos. I don't know the law on this, but I would not be surprised if it is those have to be legal or have to be available to the public. Sorry if I didn't mention I'm trying to fight off some heady congestion here. So my airborne next to me. Um, yeah, so we have the same thing. We got the to, we've got the from. Okay, again, we've got here we have from two individuals and for to a group of people. Now, again, I am now the secondary audience. The public, the viewing public, is the secondary audience here. Now, the third audience, which I call the peripheral audience because they're out there. It's otherwise been they've been called the hidden audience, which I'm not crazy about because that implies that they can't be found or they're intentionally not being found. Where peripheral, these are audiences that are maybe not in your foreground, your foresight, but they should be somewhere in there. You should be mindful of them. You should be thinking about them, and therefore, this affects your writing. You know, what happens if someone that unintended comes along? And this is why professional writing is crucial because it's somewhat more objective, at least a lot of forms of it. And the memo is a particularly excellent example of that. I don't want to say extreme because it's not the most extreme form of professional writing, but it is a tone, a voice that is suitable for a document that is going, say, in this case, from person to person or person to team, and you're aware of a secondary audience that there's going to be a group of people who are interested. Maybe it's other employees of the university. Maybe it's other people from the greater Green Bay community who might be of interest. But it's also, I mean, I'm just able to look up UWGB memo and I get this entire library of memos that have been written. So anyone in the public can see these. Those are the peripheral audiences. Those also have to be accommodated. And you do that by writing professionally, very clean. Memos are, therefore, as you can imagine, um, very well crafted. A lot of time goes into these, many voices, many rounds of revision. All right. So if we go back to our example, let's see how this is broken down a little bit. Airborne. Ugh. Actually, that didn't taste too bad. I think it was just a little bit gritty down there at the bottom. Anyway, so to, from, we use our titles because those titles might change. As we looked at this example, Michael Alexander, Chancellor elect. He is the current Chancellor of UWGB, so I imagine that title has changed. But again, this is a form of record keeping. It tells us this is a portrait of a moment in time when, in this case, Jonathan Fitzgerald was the market research assistant. He might be in another position. He may no longer be employed with the company. Including the title in there isn't some sort of flex here. It's more of a, again, this is the position that this person had at that time. The date, obviously important. Just like emails, your subject line is going to be very important. Fall, close, line, promotion. Okay, very clear, very concise, 3 to 4 words. Uh, you will definitely see longer ones in memos. You do not typically see. I'm not sure I've ever seen a memo sent out, like copy and pasted into an email and sent out that way. That said, I'm sure it's done. I don't know if that's appropriate. What I would typically see people do is say um, they would attach a memo to an email with a memo, please review something, but then attach that memo as an attachment, right? Typically a PDF, so it's not. There's usually there is often a measure of security that's involved. So a PDF, a Word does it too, but added security measures to prevent any sort of copying or editing, especially if that memo is of a particularly sensitive nature, which I don't know if I've ever seen anything that big of a deal. Memos are also printed off and placed in publicly viewing areas. Uh, if you go to any sort of, if you have a break room at your workplace, any sort of area where employees might be convening or gathering, a kitchenette or whatever, you'll often see memos in there. All right, they'll be posted for everyone to view. The intention is that you want to get the information out to everyone who is affected by it. So even though Kelly Anderson is the direct primary audience, the secondary audience is definitely in mind here. So how do we start writing these? Market research and analysis show that the proposed advertising media for the new fall lines need to be reprioritized and changed. Very direct, very clear. This is a directive that is the first line. Think about the difference in emails. Hello, there's usually a little bit of pleasantry. Hello, good morning. If you followed an email with something like this, it would be almost jarring. There's usually a little bit of, a little bit of salutary pleasantries, right? Market research and analysis show that the proposed advertising media for the new fall lines need to be reprioritized and changed. This is an exceptionally well-written statement too. Market research and analysis show. So the way that this person is constructing this is showing the evidence, putting that first and foremost, based on this, because of this. Market research and analysis show. Interestingly, it does not say our market research and analysis show. It makes it much more objective. And this is the other part of memos that's really important to be aware of. Memos are almost always written from an objective point of view. There's a number of reasons for this. Often, in the rare exception being when a CEO, this is the only time I've ever seen. So if Bezos, Gates, I don't believe is a CEO anymore, but certainly in a position still where he would be, it's usually from individuals. If they are giving a directive to, say, an entire organization, or even reporting on something good happening, that's usually the case where you have I would like to, the first person voice. Otherwise, it's third person and very objective, right? So market research and analysis based on this evidence show that the proposed advertising media for the new fall lines needs to be reprioritized and changed. So right away from that first line, I know where the evidence is coming from, and I know exactly what the purpose of this email is for. And if I'm on that marketing team, I'm probably, even within the first line, probably not feeling too good right now. And now look at how this breaks down some market research and analysis. This leads up to findings from focus groups and surveys have made it apparent that we need to update our advertising efforts to align them, yada, yada. Okay. No longer are young adults interested in sitcoms. Okay. N- and it's cool to see this happening. And if you're watching this or paying attention to this, look at there's a formula here that's happening. Okay. Market research and analysis. Okay. Very, very high level. Or at least, I'm sorry, oops, very broad, right? And as you work your way into this through this paragraph, it narrows the scope as you go through. Market research and analysis show, okay, that the proposed advertising media for the new fall lines need to be reprioritized and changed. Again, very broad. Next sentence, findings. So from market and research analysis, we're going to findings from focus groups and surveys. So again, market research and analysis, findings from focus groups and surveys, and then what are those findings? No longer are young adults interested in sitcoms as they watch reality television shows. All right. Also, this last sentence is a little bit different, so I'm going to hold off on that. So again, market research, findings. These are the findings. You see how that structure happens in each level? It drills down on two points, however. Proposed advertising media for the new fall lines need to be reprioritized and changed. How do we need to change it and reprioritize this? Update our advertising efforts to align them with the styles and trends of young adults today. Okay, again, narrowing the scope. They're not watching. They're not interested in sitcoms as they watch. We're back in 2007, apparently young adults were more interested in reality TV, which tracks. Okay, so again, there's two components of each of these statements. Each one drills down and the scope is narrowed as we move through. Now, this second statement, or this final statement, is more of a transition. Now, notice that it is taking market research, the findings, and what is the other component? Uh, Also, in those findings, based on that market research, it has become increasingly important to use the internet as a tool to communicate. So, here we have a market research team saying, "Look, Kelly, we have an issue here. We need to get with the times. There's this thing called the interwebs that we need to start sending our advertising in those pipes to, and stop spending money on commercials during sitcoms because no one's watching them anymore. They're all watching reality television. All right, so that's it. And now this transition statement is telling us it's working in a couple of ways. From a composition standpoint, it's introducing us to the next section, right? On a broader scale, thinking about this as a memo, it's also suggesting the point of action that's going to be coming up. Okay, let's pause there. I want to switch over to let's see how our chancellor-elect and interim chancellor. Let's see how they do it because it might be a little bit different. I haven't looked at this yet, so I might be setting myself up for embarrassment. As the university transitions from the decisions relating to the spring and summer instruction and campus events, we are now in a position to focus on the next 12 months. This is COVID. Oh, yeah, sure enough. Next statement talking about COVID. So again, broad. As the university transitions from the decisions, bigger and bigger, relating to the spring and summer instruction. Okay, is this rate during COVID? Boy, I can't remember. Seems like ages ago. In campus events, we are now in a position to focus on the next 12 months. So this is literally a memo describing the transition process. Especially this would be important given that, interim, so there's probably a little bit of personnel change happening here. Now this broad, now we're going to narrow it a bit. In addition to short-term emergency response plans, leaders must start planning for the long-term impact of the COVID-19 outbreak. So I'm thinking this is shortly after COVID erupted, right around spring break. So they were moving pretty fast on this. We believe there are going to be important changes in how we go to educating our students, operating the university, and engaging the community. So there's a lot going on in this memo, right? There's a lot of baggage to unpack here. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is similar to the example from Purdue OWL, right? So it's broad and then it's narrowing its scope, and then it's starting to talk about, okay, here we're going to talk about the changes. So now I'm thinking they're going to be outlining some serious, significant changes throughout this memo. We must determine the best and safest way. Here's the reasoning behind that statement. So following that up. Now again, think about who the primary audience is. Okay, scenario planning task force chairs. Who would that secondary audience be? I'm guessing it's folks like me who are working on this campus who are going to pick up on this memo and want to know what's going on. What is the conversation? What's happening at the upper levels that I need to know so I can plan, so I can prepare. But also the public. Very likely that the Gazette, the Green Bay Gazette Post-Gazette was going to be interested in this information as well. Parents might be interested in this information as well. All right, so these are our again, our peripheral audiences, not hidden because we know they're there, but they're not necessarily in front of our faces. We're not directly addressing them, but they're there, and we need to be considering their needs a little bit as well. And in this case, it's information. How are you going to keep my son or daughter safe? What is the university going to be doing to make sure that they are taken care of while they're away from home? All right, so the university, and so then they're going to go through and detail all of the things that they're doing. All right, so I'm not going to go through this, but again, we have one of my favorite qualities of professional and technical writing: the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here are what I'm guessing are 5. Let's see, what is this? Both interim and the community committees will be led by subject matter experts and are charged. So here we are. We're listing off the committees that are going to be handling a profoundly difficult time. There's some remarkable people on this list too, I have to say. Anyway, please be prepared to put forth names of faculty. So we have some direction from scenario planning task force chair. So there's probably a task force put together on the fly, and now they're saying, hey, we've got these committees, and we need people who are subject experts who can get in there and help get us through this, right? Please be prepared to put forth names, faculty, staff, students, or community members to serve on your respective committee. April 29th, 2020. So we're looking at 3 days. 3 days. That's how quickly we were working. Man, that was wild. I was not involved in any of this level of preparation. I was still trying to get my students just through whatever was to come for the next month and a half. All right. So you got all sorts of other details. Again, one of the things, let's go back. So here we have another section. We have our bulleted list. Kind of a weird list to have here, but I guess I'm not sure how better you would prepare that. Here we have television advertising. We know from the introduction that they're positioning internet, they're reprioritizing internet advertising over television advertising. So it used to be common to advertise for our products on shows like Friends and Seinfeld. Notice, here's the other interesting quality about memos. Again, as I mentioned, unless you're the CIO or CEO, you rarely see a memo being used in the first person, I. It's usually we, our, us, third person, or no, sorry, first person plural, if that's a thing. If I'm sure it is, that's what I'm calling it, no matter what. Not I, we. Not us, not mine, ours. Um, Reasons for this ob- objectivity shows a unified, sort of cohesive agreement because memos are typically written on behalf of a wider, a larger group. The other thing that I think is unique about this example is even though it's from two people, this is not, we are now in a position to focus on the next 12 months. This is not saying that uh, Michael and Cheryl are ready to start planning. This is all of us. So we use language like we and our to be more inclusive. We're all in this together, right? The university's scenario planning task force. So again, that's being very directive. So you should start to be seeing a lot of the qualities of memos that make them different from letters, and you typically wouldn't write a letter in this case, too slow. Um, Emails even. Emails are typically not made public, not intentionally anyway, but they, especially in a public institution, they are subject to FOIA requests. But that takes time, and there are also issues involved. Memos are written with the implicit purpose of being publicly available, or the anticipation that if not now, they sometime will be. So again, it's a record keeping of all the cool stuff that people were doing, how hard they were working. It's a snapshot of that time. All right. Memos. Okay. Now in this case, we've got internet. Now we're going to television. We're saying, okay, we need to focus our advertising budget on reality TV shows. So again, reconfiguring. We're no longer going to be advertising on sitcoms. We're going to be focusing on reality television. So this is sort of the secondary objective of this memo, right? And then we close with a little bit more information. By refocusing our advertising efforts of our new line of clothing, we will be able to maximize the exposure of our product, good marketing language, to our target market and therefore increase our sales. Tapping into the trends of young adults will help us gain market share, and sales through effective marketing. Memos typically close with some sort of call to action. Um, in this case, I would have, it's implied. I think it's very explicit. Well, it's the way this language is couched, the way it's phrased, it feels very light. It could have been a little bit more. Um, what do you say? What's the word? Uh, Assertive. By refocusing our um, By refocusing our advertising efforts of our new line of clothing, we will be able to maximize the exposure of our product to our target market and therefore increase our sales. So the research assistant is sharing findings, probably not in a position to make that call or make the sort of direction. So that's why this information was a little bit light. So got a little bit ahead of myself. In this case, it's not a CEO or CIO making a direct order. This is offering a suggestion, right? So good feedback. Okay, this is good feedback on our advertising. All right. Speaking of which, I'm going to go a little bit longer today because it did take me a little bit of time to get things organized today. So what is the ask from our interim chancellor and chancellor elect? We ask that your committee develop various scenarios with responsive, specific recommendations for each scenario and present your findings to Cabinet by May 31st, 2020. Please plan to provide weekly written or verbal reports to Cabinet beginning on May 5th. Here is a much more explicit directive. Okay, notice it's written very politely. Interestingly, yes, we it does sort of shift. Um, Maybe there is a little bit of ambiguity between the use of we, because I feel as though we are now in a position to focus. This here, is, I believe, speaks to as the university transitions, we are now. So, in that case, um, we believe there are going to be important changes in how we go about educating our students. And so, I feel the way I'm reading this is that the we shifts. Now, this is an interesting little technique here, and I really like this. As the university, the we in this case represents the university. In the very next, in the two sentences later, this we here becomes a little bit more. Who does this represent? Is this the university? Is this the chancellor elect and interim chancellor? Or is it both? Or is something happening here where they're using that information? It would be kind of interesting to ask them, like, what? Who are you? That would be cool. I'm gonna to remember to do this. I'm gonna ask them, what were you talking about? Chances are, I would be willing to bet that someone. I'm guessing. Chancellor, if I'm wrong, please don't hesitate to send me an email. But I'm guessing someone else wrote this, right? And but I don't know if this was intentional or not, but very cool how they have this we here. We must determine the best and safest way we will bring faculty, staff, and students back to campus. Our goal is to create a task force. Okay, so I believe it is shifting to the chancellor elect and the interim chancellor. This is the reasoning, but behind the information they're about to provide, just like the example we looked at before. Okay, so very cool. And then when we get down to the end, we ask that your committee, again, this is still we. So it's interesting the change. Without spending any more time and belaboring this more, I'd be interested in seeing how often that we shifts, who that we represents throughout this memo. So very cool. But again, keep in mind that the next thing would be the last thing needs to be your we ask. What are you asking? What's your direction? This one is also um, you don't typically see these in memos. Thank you for your leadership and commitment to these unprecedented and challenging times. This is sort of a almost a trope of pandemic era correspondence where we insisted almost on adding a little bit of extra language in there, um, showing appreciation, right? Because everyone was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. We are confident UW Green Bay's determination and resilience. So a lot of that little stuff. Usually there might be some contact information later on, but in this case, it's pretty easy to find. This is attachments. This would probably tell you which attachments are associated with this. So in case someone was doing research on this, they could find. Hopefully, those attachments will also be available. All right. So that is the memo. Let's. I'm gonna go ahead and take a few seconds break. I'm gonna grab some water because my throat's getting a little sore. I'll be right back in about 5 minutes. All right. We're going to shift gears a little bit. I never actually ended up getting the water I was hoping to get, but I should be fine. All right. I think next week I've got scheduled a grab bag, but I think what I'm going to do is focus on AI writing a little bit. I want to spend some time playing around with that. And I'm going to do some experimenting, and because we're going to be talking about that in our classes, if not, probably this week in person and online. We'll put something out there soon for next week. But I think it's something that everyone's talking about. I feel like the dust is settling a little bit, which is good. So you're not getting these strong responses one way or the other. But we'll talk about it a little bit later. Talk about some of that next week. All right. So here we have an example of a memo. I full disclosure, this is a student email, and I there is no information here um, who that person is. So unfortunately, I was not able to reach out to that person and get their permission, but there should be no information on here. You see my little Grammarly bubble hanging out over here. I'm kind of curious what it says, but all right. So now we're going to talk about feedback a little bit. I'm not going to spend any more time talking about the memo itself. This is a student draft, so um, you know I know there are going to be some things I can add to here, but I just want to go over the peer review process again, or at least my recommended process for doing so, right? And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through each stage, but I think it's worth mentioning that as you're going through this peer review process, you got to make sure that you're dedicating enough time to do it. It's really important um, to give a respectable and respectful amount of time to read someone's work. They're counting on you to, maybe pick up errors, but that's not even the priority when we're doing peer review. It's to be thinking about the ideas first. Okay, so here we have our to, we have our from. So here we have a situation where the marketing manager is addressing the cashiers and the sales floor staff at a bakery. This is a submission for an assignment. We have the date, subject, bringing back punch card, incentive for bread. Okay, so we have a little bit of a, how could this be revised a little bit? I'm gonna make a little mental note of it, but I'm just gonna do a quick read through. I'm looking for our purpose. Um, Here we have our um, similar. It sounds very familiar to the memos we read earlier. All right, I'll get to that. So I'm going to give this a good read through, give it a sense of what we're looking at. All right, gives your okay, good. It's looking good so far. So a broad sort of read through. Is the purpose clear? And then as I go through, I'm going to go through a little bit slower and make notes as I go through. Because this is a Word file, I can make my notes right on there and add comments. Okay. So the first thing I would do is save another version, which I've done. Okay, so I save a version of this. Let's see. So I've saved another copy. I've put it renamed it. So I'll say something like save as to desktop. Let's say memo reviewed with my initials. Okay. It's important to save a copy whenever you're giving feedback and you have if you're working with someone's digital file. I would always save a new copy, so they can keep that organized. And it's not going to potentially corrupt their version. Okay. So the first thing I would say, I'm going to go up to review, and I'm going to click on track changes. And so everything I change in this file from here on out is going to be tracked. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, right? So it still shows that it's there, telling the writer, okay, I got rid of this, but I'm just going to remove it. If I'm feeling particularly generous, I might say unnecessary. Did I spell this right? Oop. Fingers are all up. So that's that. So I'll just I have a comment there, says exactly why I removed it. I might not do that every time though. Okay. Okay. So after evaluating our sales data over the last 6 months, we have found that our highest source of daily revenue is from our bread. Okay. Good. Using evidence to support. Right. So again, this is one thing to be doing is just on feedback. Also be talking about the positive. What's really good. We as a company, unnecessary. But however, even as I remove that, it is after evaluating data, we have found that Rise and Shines. So this is doing something similar. So, okay, who are we talking about after evaluating our sales data? I might say after evaluating the sales data for Rise and Shine Bakery over the last 6 months, we have found that our highest, and I might say I might use specific dates. So I'm going to say, what is that? 9. So from February. September. So after evaluating the sales data for Rise and Shine Bakery from February through September of 2020, we have found that our highest source of daily revenue is from our bread. Okay. So here is, even though it's a good statement, notice how I've spent a lot of time just on that first sentence. Okay, is it accomplishing what I need it to do? Is it doing it as clearly as possible? Is it providing some pieces of information that are very crucial to understanding exactly what this memo is about? Based on sales data, who are we talking about? What is the duration, the time frame that we're looking at? And what is the result of that work, right? What is the result of that evaluation? Okay, everything in that one sentence. Everything else in this memo should be supporting in some way that work. Now, if we look back to our other examples, our next few statements should be discussing, refining that scope. Okay, we are in an extremely competitive area for bakeries, and to ensure, and to ensure that we come out on top. I'm not so much worried about this. I'm still sticking with the ideas. We will introduce a punch card incentive. Okay. So based on this evaluation, we're going to implement. I may have said, I suggested a little bit more of a transition there. Based on this evaluation, we want to, based on our evaluation, we want to reinforce those sales. To help reinforce those sales, we're going to introduce a punch card incentive. Do you see what I'm doing there? Again, adding these stages and staggering further refining the scope as we move through. And then finally, prepare, this system will reward our customers for continuing to stay consistent with our company by giving them, so the ideas are there. I can see how I'm going to refine it. I'm making notes on the side here. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to come back to this. And then here we have, make sure I got that. This promotion will begin Saturday, October 1st, 2022. And it will remain in effect until further notice. Notice as I'm removing these spaces, Track Changes is not doing that automatically for me. It's keeping the formatting and everything in there. This is a key component of peer review. It's not editing, okay? It's still leaving the writer to go through and make those changes by hand, all right? This promotion will begin Saturday, October 1st, 2022. I'm not worrying about what Grammarly's telling me, and remain in effect until further notice. Okay, this is a nice piece of information. Is it, my suggestion, and this is something I explicitly stated, is that I would add this information in the memo because it's very important. Okay, I might also add a little bit more information that explains, is there... So here we have, I might add some information about, it's important that all cashier, front of house employees know the procedures for using these cards, and then they're going to go into the rules, right? So there's a lot happening here. I'm already picking up at the idea level, right? There's a lot of time. What have I spent 15 minutes just on that first paragraph? And I could be spending more, but I'm not, okay? So they're going to go through, and I'm not going to go through all of the details on this. Next level, I'm going to be looking at formatting. Formatting's pretty good. I might say, hey, I might go back here, reduce the spacing. It's got auto. I'm just going to go ahead and put that 0 so the spacing's back down a little bit. Just cleans it up a little bit. Everything else is first person, keeping it consistent throughout. In fact, I'll just go ahead and do that for the entire. So Word automatically adds a space. The default, I believe, is to add space. I think you can change that, but that's one point of feedback I'll often give is like, oh, if Word's putting in an extra space in there, you don't need that. All right, so we have that. So the third run through again is formatting, and we are looking through. It's like, yeah, we've got some bulleted lists here that look good. I might say, yeah, I don't need that underlined. It's a little bit much. Clean it up a little bit. So do that. These headings are nice. They're pretty good. It's interesting that the typeface on here is Times New Roman, and it's kind of difficult to read bold and upper all caps like that. So one thing I might suggest doing, I might change that, but that's a little bit more intermediate level designerly stuff, so we're not worried about that right now. All right, so this particular example includes an image of that card. I am going to, I like that. I might place it where it is most relevant, however, just to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Let's keep that information over there. So, I'm playing with the design a little bit, but again, I'm giving feedback. Now, the person has every right to say, nah, I don't like that image up there, or maybe I'm just going to go ahead and remove it. It sort of clutters things up, but I like this because it does give an example of what that card looks like, right? I don't know why that's not being removed. Thank you word for. My goodness, what the heck is going on here? Anyway, then the last run through. Then I'm going to start looking at grammar and spelling. Now, I got my little Grammarly thing here, and I'm digging it so far. I just started using it, but it's okay. I don't like the premium. So in order, the card must have 5 punches and be shown to the cashier in order to redeem the free loaf of bread. Now, one thing I do like about Grammarly is that you have the settings to make it how the level of formality. And this one is set for whatever the most professional setting was. And so again, it's offering suggestions to help clean it up, right? To redeem the free loaf of bread, right? Let's see, where's this next one? If a customer is questioning about purchasing about, so we have a typo here. So remove that. Again, notice that this is not removing it. The person still has to go through. And now ideally, whoever wrote this is going to look through and go, oh yeah, I do have I maybe I need to proofread a little bit better, right? When a customer comes up to the counter with a card that is full, okay, versus a full card. Again, one of the reasons I do like Grammarly, this is the free version. It does catch those little pieces of writing that could be simplified. It does, however, catch weird little things like that. Okay. Let's see. It's sales. Ryzen, after evaluating the sales data. See, here is another point about peer review, especially when it comes to using tools like this. You don't have to accept all of them. There's a tendency to say, well, if Grammarly says it, I'm going to go ahead and do it. That's not the case. After evaluating the sales data for Rise and Shine Bakery, our implies that if the marketing team did do that, I would say after evaluating the marketing team's sales data, uh, after evaluating the sales data provided by the marketing team for Rise and Shine Bakery. This is saying the sales data for Rise and Shine Bakery. So it's up to me to accept this. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss it. September 2022. Let's do September 2020. I'll accept that with giving them. This system will reward our customers for continuing to stay consistent with our company by giving them with a free loaf of bread. So yeah, that would be change. Toto. So it's picking up that some of the information is still in there, but that's okay. All right, so Grammarly is picking up a couple of other little grammatical things. Where are you at? When a customer comes to the counter to check out and they have a loaf of bread, I might say when a customer comes to the counter and have a loaf of bread. Yeah, right. So again, Grammarly's doing a good job of like really cleaning up the language. So and that's like the last stage, and I'm still going through there with thinking about being very intentional. Grammarly's helping, but I'm still going through. It's a good way of getting some of those surface level things up, but I don't want to focus on that. Okay, if I start focusing on those minutia right away, I'm gonna get bogged down. Okay, especially when you're thinking about the ideas. You're probably if you're editing at the level of ideas or you're making suggestions at the level of ideas, that writer's gonna have to go through and rewrite possibly many portions of that writing. So why focus so much on the spelling errors if those might get picked up? It might be erased. It might be removed. Um, Anyway, so one of the other things that you want to be giving. So there, if I were to give this back, let's say this is all reviewed and all of the changes are tracked. I'm going to send this back to the person I'm reviewing, and send it say attach it in an email, and if not on the draft, the reviewed draft itself, I might say in the email, here are some things I noticed. Really good job providing a summary. Some of the evidence, using that to ground the reasoning behind this. Really like how you set up all the rules. It's very clear. However, here's some things that I noticed to look at, as you're going through. So again, positioning that feedback as a dialogue, asking questions, offering suggestions, but not necessarily giving directions, and not making edits that the writer can just assume have been done. Again, that's the respect for the writer, but also respect for, you want them to, you want to give them the opportunity to slightly, to make those improvements on their own writing. All right, so that's our intention for feedback. All right. It is almost 1 o'clock. Not quite, but I'm going to go ahead and close things up. It's um, quite a few things touched on this time around. Memos and feedback. So hopefully this was helpful. If there's anything that, if you're watching this and things aren't, um, if you have any feedback for the stream, for example, or if you would like feedback on some of your writing, contact me through the appropriate channels. And I hope to be reviewing some actual writing soon. Thanks to our anonymous student for unintentionally providing this example. I doubt that they're watching, but it's a good example. I selected it because it does have areas, as I'll say. I got to come up with a catchphrase that says something along the lines of, "You're always going to be a terrible writer, but don't give up." I don't know. It's something that we're always going to. I'm a terrible writer. It's something that we're always working on. Most good writers are, in fact, terrible writers. They do have good editors, and they have wonderful networks of support that can offer suggestions. Very rarely do you find um, people in this day and age who can write with perfection, if they even exist. I doubt they exist. Anyway, have a great week. I will see you on Tuesday. We'll talk about AI and let's see what else. Purpose. All right. Later.